Have you ever walked into a moment so full of energy that you could feel the hairs on your arms stand up? It was that kind of day at Horse Guards Parade. In the middle of summer in London, the sun shone on the stone and the air was thick with the smell of street food and the sound of 1,000 lives colliding. Red and loud open-top buses drove by. Tourists crowded in groups, cameras clicked, and laughter spilled down the steps. In the middle of all this modern chaos stood a man and his horse, both dressed in clothes that had been worn for hundreds of years. Thunder was the name of an 8-year-old purebred black charger who stood proud and still, as if he had been carved out of midnight. His coat was black and shiny, like polished coal, and the gold and red of the household cavalry shone against his sides. Kids pulled on their parents' sleeves and begged for a picture with the royal horsey, but Thunder didn't move a muscle. Sergeant Oliver Kensington, the rider, sat tall in the saddle, as still as a statue, with his eyes hidden behind the shiny brim of his ceremonial helmet. But his mind was anything but still under that armor. He could sense it. The city's pulse never stops, the wild energy coming from the nearby pubs, where soccer fans had spilled out into the street after the Premier League match. United had beaten Chelsea, and London was alive with both celebration and the threat of chaos. There were times when these things got ugly. On the parade ground, it started normal enough. A group of American students tried to make Thunder smile for TikTok while holding up selfie sticks. A British kid, who was only a little taller than Thunder's knee, tried to stroke his nose, but his older sister laughed and pulled him back. An old soldier in a tweed jacket saluted Oliver, who barely nodded back. But then things changed. You know how the mood changes, right? It's hard to put into words. It felt like the air pressure dropped, or the sun went behind a cloud. There was a ripple in the crowd. 3 young men walked through the plaza like sharks through a school of fish, pushing tourists out of the way. Their eyes were red and wild from beer, and their voices were too loud. Their Manchester United jerseys stuck to their backs, and their laughter was sharp and mocking. Liam was in front, holding his phone high and already streaming to his fans. Ethan, who was tall and skinny, followed behind, tossing bottle caps across the cobblestones and looking around for attention. Jordan, the quietest, smiled as he filmed with a GoPro, looking for anything that would make good content. They didn't walk, they prowled, bringing the electricity of the stadium and the carelessness of youth straight into the heart of tradition. Oliver saw them right away. These weren't gangsters, they were just local guys, but he knew them. They got into trouble, or maybe it was the other way around. He held on to the reins more tightly. Thunder's eyes flicked. He was alert, but not scared. The tourists felt it too. A couple from Japan moved away and whispered nervously. A mother hurried her kids back to the safety of the crowd. Liam walked right up to the horse, which was much closer than any sane person would. He smiled at his phone, which was recording every second. "Hey, look at this. The Queen's horse looks nice and all. What's he going to do, dance?" His voice echoed off the old stone, and the crowd laughed nervously. Ethan acted like he was going to fall and dropped to one knee next to Thunder's back leg. "Don't kick me, dude. I'm just tying my shoes, I swear." He winked at his friends, and they all laughed. Jordan kept filming, holding his phone steady. "Hey, get closer. Try to get him to bite you." He yelled. Oliver didn't move or say anything. He had been trained for this. No response, no weakness. But he saw Thunder's nostrils flare and the way the big horse's body moved, with muscles coiling just under the skin. Then a little something extra. One of the boys, Liam, reached out and touched the shiny leather of Thunder's saddle. The crowd was silent. Thunder, always the professional, didn't move, but his tail flicked once like a whip. It was enough to make the line of tourists shake. A little boy gasped. His mother took hold of his arm. "Don't go near, love. These horses are trained. They're not pets," she whispered. But she couldn't take her eyes off the scene. The jangling tune of a street musician stopped playing from somewhere behind them, and the hot air made it stop. It seemed like even the pigeons were quiet. Liam smiled, feeling brave because people were looking at him. "Do you think they would arrest me if I got on for a ride? I bet I could get 1,000,000 views." Ethan cheered him on. "Do it for TikTok, man." The challenge hung in the air like a dare. Oliver finally spoke, his voice low and hard, like a growl. "Sir, get away from the horse. This is a guard that works." But the warning only made them laugh even more. Jordan moved his camera around to get a shot of the crowd's reactions, which ranged from awe to excitement to growing unease. And then there was even more tension. At the end of the parade ground, a group of teens started singing football songs, their voices getting louder and louder, which made the adrenaline flow. It was as if all of London's chaos was coming together in this one weak spot where old and new met. Thunder moved his weight, which only Oliver understood. Not fear, but readiness. This horse had been trained not to panic, but to do what it needed to do. A loud shout made a beer can roll across the street and stop by Thunder's hooves. Ethan lunged for it and laughed, but Thunder took a slow half step to the side, putting himself between Oliver and the troublemakers. The movement was smooth, almost like it was nothing, but it pushed the boys back half a step. The tourists whispered, and you could feel the excitement in the air. Someone took out their phone and started filming. A police siren could be heard in the distance. It was faint at first, but it got louder. For a brief moment, everything seemed to be on hold. Oliver sat still in his saddle, with Thunder below him, both of them strong. The three troublemakers were wild and reckless, and wanted to break the rules. The crowd was torn between being interested and scared. It wasn't just a summer afternoon in London anymore. This was a test, a battle of discipline, tradition, and pure modern bravado, and it was just getting started. From the first light of morning, Horse Guards Parade was alive and breathing with the unique rhythm of central London. It was strange to see the old and the new all in one place, on this cobblestone expanse. On one side, tourists were waiting in line to take pictures with their phones and selfie sticks that looked like antennas sticking up above the crowd. On the other hand, people from London hurried by, barely looking at the show they had grown up with. The famous red buses rumbled behind them as if nothing was going on, and the sound of horseshoes hitting stone, which is older than the city itself, ran through it all. Thunder stood still, his eyes taking in the changing world around him. His tack shone, and the light bounced off it in shards. The household cavalry's insignia stood out against the deep black of his coat. Every muscle in his body, every twitch of his ear, showed that he was strong and disciplined. He was made for this, made to be steady and able to stand in the middle of chaos and be the eye of the storm. But he wasn't just a prop. Even though he looked calm on the outside, Thunder's mind was always working, reading the crowd, listening to the city's heartbeat, and being aware of every change in mood or movement. Sergeant Oliver Kensington, who rode with him, was just like him. Oliver looked like a soldier at 32. He had broad shoulders, a set jaw, and a shiny helmet that marked him as Kingsguard. He had been in much worse places than this, like deserts, mountains, and war zones. Afghanistan stayed in the back of his mind, and the memories of dust, heat, and adrenaline never really went away. But the job was different here in the middle of London. It wasn't always clear who the enemy was. There were times when it was the slow loss of respect, the way people made fun of tradition, or the fear that a crowd would turn violent at any moment. Oliver looked around with trained eyes as the clock tower struck the half hour. He saw everything: the German couple whispering in awe, the teenager pretending to pose with a royal guard face, and the American kids arguing about whether the horses were real. The scene was almost perfect for a moment. A British boy with a Harry Potter shirt pulled on his mother's hand and begged to touch Thunder's nose. His older sister, who was taller and braver, crept a little closer and giggled when Thunder snorted. Oliver let out a small, secret smile because he missed the good old days. Thunder lowered his head just a little so the girl could stroke his soft muzzle before she ran away, her cheeks flushed with excitement. But even though the mood was light, Oliver was on guard. He had heard the news. Manchester United won big, the local pubs were full, and football fans were coming in droves. He knew how quickly happiness could turn into trouble, and how a party could turn into a mess. For a second, his radio crackled to life, and a fellow guard's voice warned him about a group of rowdy fans coming up from Whitehall. Oliver's grip on the reins got tighter, but on the outside, he looked calm as ever. A woman came up to me with a shiny map of London in one hand and a camera in the other. She smiled at Oliver, her eyes shining like a typical tourist's. "Hey, can I take a picture with your horse?" she asked, and her accent was clearly Texan. Oliver nodded, his voice steady. "Of course, ma'am. Please just stand next to him, not in front of him. Thunder is a pro, but he's still a horse." She laughed and posed for her husband to take a picture. "He's so pretty. Is he really a member of the Queen's Guard?" "Yes, ma'am, he is. Thunder has been on display for 3 years now. He's seen more action than most London cab drivers." That made everyone laugh, and for a moment the tension went down again. But the world kept changing in the background. The faint roar from a nearby pub spilled out, and the sounds of drunken songs and loud fights got closer. Oliver saw a group of men with red and white scarves around their necks stagger down the street, their chants echoing off the stone. He could feel Thunder's muscles tighten, not because he was scared, but because he was excited. The horse could tell something was wrong before it broke, almost like he was reading the air. And then, through the crowd, the first sign of the real danger appeared. Liam and his crew, who were already half drunk from the pub, walked back into the scene. They weren't subtle, their voices louder than anyone else, their movements cocky and loose. One of them said to Oliver, "Hey mate, does the Queen pay you to stand still, or does the horse get paid?" The crowd laughed nervously. Oliver didn't move. His eyes were straight ahead, and every muscle was tight. Thunder flicked an ear, which was his own warning. The tension spread out. The American woman pulled her husband away because she felt something was wrong. The mother of the Harry Potter kid hurried her kids back, and the boy looked back with wide, worried eyes. Even the pigeons seemed to fly away, sensing the change. A steward, a young man in a bright vest, suddenly stepped forward and raised his hand in a warning gesture. "Please be polite to the guard, gentlemen. Step back, or you'll be asked to leave the area." His voice was firm, but not threatening. Liam smiled at him, and Ethan pretended to salute. "Yes, sir, no fun allowed. Come on, guys, let's see if the horse wants a picture with us." The group moved closer, and their shadows fell on Thunder's side. Oliver's heart thudded in his chest. He had been in real danger before, like bullets, bombs, and men with hate in their eyes. But this was different. The threat came with a smile and a smartphone. Hidden behind jokes and drunken bravado, right in the middle of London. but he knew all too well how quickly things could get out of hand. Thunder's nostrils opened wide. His hoof tapped the stone, a quiet sign that he was ready. "Easy, boy," Oliver said, in a low voice that only the horse could hear. "We can do this." But as the crowd watched, half amused and half afraid, a storm was brewing on Horseguard's parade. It would push both tradition and resolve to their limits. It started out like any other Saturday afternoon after a big game. Too much beer, too much excitement, and not enough common sense. The narrow streets around Whitehall were alive with the sound of Manchester United's victory ringing through every pub and side street. The energy was crazy, electric, and almost too much to handle. Liam and his friends had already gone viral twice by the time they got to the parade. Once for singing United songs on the tube, and once for a drunken prank at a kebab shop. But when they stumbled out of the dark arcade and into the light, Liam knew he needed something bigger and bolder to really get TikTok going. Horseguard's parade, with its grand history, looked like a good place to go. It was almost too good to be true. Tourists stood in line like extras in a movie. Red-coated soldiers stood at attention. And the best part was a living, breathing black stallion that looked like he belonged in an ancient epic. Liam's eyes lit up when he saw Thunder and his rider, Sergeant Oliver Kensington, holding court in the middle of everything. "Hey guys, look at this!" Liam called, and his voice was already a little hoarse from hours of yelling. He raised his phone and turned the camera around so that the people watching could see what he was seeing. "Royalty from London right here. Do you think this fancy horse will give us a ride?" Ethan laughed and elbowed Jordan. "I'll bet you £5 he doesn't even flinch, mate. These people have been trained, right? Like robots. Proper British discipline." He pretended to salute, but then he almost fell over when he tried to bow to Thunder. The crowd, which was already on edge from what had happened before, moved around nervously, with some laughing and others turning away. Jordan, who never misses a shot, steadied his GoPro and began to circle, recording everything. "Thunder, smile for the camera," he joked. "We'll make you famous." And his words were just loud enough to make a few tourists cringe. Oliver stayed still, but his heart was beating steadily and steadily in his chest. He had fought insurgents and dealt with IEDs, but there was something especially scary about a crowd that was acting strangely. The rules here weren't written down, and the threats weren't as clear, but the results were just as real. His eyes moved down to Thunder, where he saw the horse's subtle signs, lips tightening, weight shifting, and ears moving back and forth like radar. Liam was the first to come up, strutting like he owned the whole city. "Hey, Sarge, does your horse need food? I got him some chips." He laughed and held out a greasy bag of fries. Thunder didn't even blink. His discipline was perfect. Oliver's jaw tightened, but he didn't say anything. "Hey, don't be rude," Ethan said, laughing. Ethan moved closer, beer can in hand, and pretended to give it to Thunder's mouth. "He probably wants a pint, not chips." The big horse rolled an eye in his direction, not impressed. The iron bit between his teeth sparkled in the sun. "Back up, please, gentlemen," Oliver said, his voice low but cutting through the noise like a knife. "You're too close to a working animal." Step back, but Liam was alive, and the only thing that mattered now were the rules of social media. "Take it easy, buddy. We're just having fun. Come on, Thunder, smile for your fans." He smiled and waved his phone in Thunder's face. The horse moved its tail once, quickly, but stayed still. The crowd began to break up. Some people moved away, not wanting to get caught up in whatever was coming. A mother pulled her daughter to safety and whispered urgently. A man with gray hair grumbled about yobs ruining everything. But some people stayed, phones in hand, ready for something to go viral. Then there was the first real push. Liam moved even closer, one hand outstretched as if to pet Thunder's nose and the other still holding his phone. Thunder's nostrils opened wide. Oliver's body got tense. He could see the boys' laughter turning into something more mean, and the crowd's unease grew stronger. "Go ahead. Touch him." Ethan pushed Liam on while the camera was still rolling. "Bet he doesn't do anything. These horses are just for show." Liam smirked, looked at the crowd, and then leaned in too quickly and too closely. Thunder's head shot up in a flash, the movement quick but controlled, sending a clear warning. The crowd gasped. Liam stumbled back, his cheeks red, but he tried to act like nothing was wrong by bowing dramatically. "Look at that! Kingsguard finally got some fire in him." Ethan and Jordan laughed loudly, but even they seemed shaken by it all. Jordan's camera caught the looks on their faces: fear, excitement, and a hint of regret. But the moment was too good to pass up. Then, with a dramatic flourish, Ethan knelt down next to Thunder's back leg and played with his shoe. But he was really just trying to get the horse to react. The crowd's fear grew. Parents pulled their kids back, and tourists whispered to each other in their own languages. Oliver had had enough of waiting. His voice was loud, clear, and commanding when he spoke. "One last warning. You need to move away from the horse and the guard, or you will be taken away." For a moment, the world was on the edge of its seat. Liam, Ethan, and Jordan looked at each other and made a choice about whether to take a chance. Then Liam, who was still streaming, shrugged. "Whatever, dude. Just wanted to see if these guys were real." He stepped back, arms raised as if to give up, but his eyes still sparkled with mischief. Ethan wasn't done, though. He pretended to check the stirrup and grabbed it. Thunder moved again, taking a single strong step forward that made Ethan jump back or risk being knocked over. The crowd cheered, and the people watching felt a wave of happiness. Even the tourists knew that Thunder wasn't just a prop. He was a force, a living example of discipline and tradition. Jordan, sensing the change in energy, lowered his camera a little, as if he finally understood how close they had come to something bad. But Liam just smiled bigger, showing off for the camera. "Look, not just for show. Let's hear it for Thunder, the hero of Horse Guard's parade," he yelled. "He bowed to the horse." And then he bowed. For a little while, the tension went away, and laughter took its place. But Oliver knew better. He could tell the storm wasn't over. Not yet. In the tense silence that followed, both the horse and the soldier stood their ground, ready for whatever came next. London held its breath. The tension that had briefly gone away came back, and it felt like the air above Horse Guard's parade had gotten thicker. It looked like everyone was staring at the small, unpredictable knot in the middle of the crowd. 3 young men who were too cocky and not respectful enough. A huge black horse. And the person who was standing on top of it. Thunder had been through worse storms, but not so close to home. He could feel the nervous energy in the people around him, the slight change in Oliver's weight, and the quiet that had settled over the tourists. The city kept going. A double-decker bus roared by in the distance. Someone yelled for a taxi on Whitehall, and a new football song floated across the square from the open door of a pub. But here the whole world was just one place, one fight, and Thunder was in the middle of it. Liam, who was encouraged by the crowd, wasn't done. More than 1,000 people were watching his live stream now. Messages came in quickly, some telling him to keep going and others telling him to stop. But the pressure of having an audience was too much to handle. He walked right up to Thunder again, closer than ever, and held his phone up high. "Okay, everyone. I'm going to test this royal horse and see if he's as tough as they say he is." The voice that had sounded like it was just playing around a moment ago now had a hint of challenge in it. Ethan crouched next to Thunder's huge side and played with his laces, but it was all for show. He looked at the camera, smiled, and then, in a flash, brushed his hand down Thunder's tail. The move was brave and foolish. Thunder's response was quick and accurate. His tail flicked, a quick, practiced motion that was more than just a warning. He moved to the side smoothly, shifting his huge weight so that his butt gently but firmly pushed Ethan away. It wasn't violence, but it was clear. A clear signal learned through months of training to keep threats at bay without hurting anyone. The tourists gasped, and a wave of whispers spread through the crowd. Ethan laughed it off, but the redness in his cheeks gave him away. "Calm down, buddy. I'm just having some fun." But Oliver's voice cut through the noise like the wind in January. "Touch the horse again, and you'll have to spend the night in jail. This isn't a place to play." Liam, who loved the drama, smiled even more. "Hey, don't get all worked up. We are just putting on a show for the people. He winked at the camera and then turned to Jordan, who had been recording the whole time. The crowd was getting bigger now. It was impossible to miss the show. People from all over, including tourists, locals, and even 2 young officers from the Metropolitan Police, started to push their way through because of the noise. Parents held their kids close, not sure if they should stay or go. One old lady who was clearly upset yelled, "Leave them alone, you hooligans! Be polite!" Most of the people in the crowd didn't listen to what she said, but a few did. Jordan raised the stakes when he felt the tension. He went to Thunder's side and grabbed the saddle, acting like he was looking at the shiny brass. "How much do you think one of these sells for on eBay?" he joked, but his voice shook a little. Oliver was losing his patience. He stood up even taller and shouted across the parade ground, "Get away! This is your last chance!" But the insults kept coming. Ethan acted like he was hurt and raised his hands in fake surrender. Okay. We'll just snap a photo, okay? No harm done." But while he was talking, he lunged forward as if to tie his shoe, then pulled on Thunder's stirrup hard, hoping for a reaction. Thunder didn't get angry or scared. Instead, he did what he had been taught to do when things got out of hand. He moved his huge body just enough to push Ethan back on his heels, all while keeping Oliver safe in the saddle. It was a move that had been around since the cavalry, and it was both subtle and strong. The crowd could feel the change. The mood wasn't just tense. It was also nervous and on edge for the first time. A few tourists began to back away. A mother grabbed her young son by the arm. Even the other guards who were nearby seemed to stand up a little straighter. In the middle of the tension, something unexpected happened. A young boy, probably 7 or 8, slipped through the crowd and stood in front of Thunder, his eyes wide and his body shaking. Everyone stopped moving for a heartbeat. The boy looked up at Oliver, his voice shaking. "Sir, is your horse all right?" Oliver gave a small nod and spoke softly, without breaking his guard. "He's fine. Thunder is the strongest horse in London. Don't worry. He's here to keep us safe." The crowd let out a sigh, and the moment of innocence broke the tension. But the break didn't last long. Liam raised the stakes one last time, maybe because he thought his time was running out. He reached out and grabbed Thunder's bridle, pulling it hard. "Let's see if this big guy can dance." Oliver's patience ran out. He stopped being formal and spoke in short, harsh sentences. "Let go, now." But before Liam could do anything, Thunder let out a loud, sharp whinny that cut through all the other sounds in the square. It was both a warning and a statement. Enough was enough. At the same time, Thunder moved forward, making Liam stumble back and almost drop his phone on the cobblestones. For a moment, Liam's bravado gave way to something like fear. Oliver took advantage of the situation. He swung down from the saddle in one smooth motion, boots hitting stone, and stood between Thunder and the troublemakers. His body showed years of discipline, and his presence radiated authority. The crowd, now invested, started to clap and cheer for the guard and his horse. The officers got closer, their radios crackling, ready to step in. But everyone knew that the balance of power had already changed. The show had gone too far. It had gone from fun to a fight for respect, and Thunder had made it clear who would win. Everything happened so quickly, but every second felt like it lasted forever because of the adrenaline and the excitement of the crowd. People could tell that the show on Horseguard's parade had changed. The air was thick with excitement, but everyone knew things had gone too far. Liam was breathing hard, and his cheeks were red from alcohol and a little bit of fear. He was still holding on to Thunder's bridle. He tried to laugh it off, but the sound was empty and echoed off the cobblestones with no one there to hear it. His phone shook, and the live comments on his stream went from LOL and fire emojis to "be careful, bro," and "back off." Ethan, who was always looking for a way to cause trouble, took a crumpled beer can out of his jacket and threw it at Thunder's front hooves. The metal clang was loud enough to be heard. A few tourists jumped and gasped at the noise. Jordan, who had been so eager to film everything, suddenly looked unsure. His GoPro dipped as he saw the fear on Liam's face. Thunder's reaction was quick but controlled, a perfect mix of instinct and training. He stomped once, making a loud noise with his hoof hitting the stone, and then he let out a short, sharp neigh. It wasn't fear, it was power. There was no doubt about the message. He was not a toy or a prop. He was a living force of order. Oliver slid off the horse in one smooth motion, his boots landing squarely on the ground. At that moment, his military training kicked in. His body was ready, and his mind was clear and sharp. He walked between Thunder and the three men, standing tall and strong. The ceremonial sword at his side shone in the late afternoon light, but his hands were open, ready to hold back, not fight. "That's enough!" Oliver's voice cracked like a whip, cutting through the noise. "You are putting both a working animal and yourselves in danger. Stop what you're doing, or you'll be arrested." But Liam, who was stubborn and angry, chose to be defiant. He pulled on the bridle again, this time harder. The crowd was breathless, and the city was quiet except for the distant honk of a taxi horn. For a split second, it seemed like the world had stopped. Thunder moved his weight and raised his head, staring at Liam. His ears were pinned back, a sign that only people who had been through it could understand. Then everything started to move at once. Thunder moved forward, not charging, but just enough that his broad chest pushed Liam's outstretched arm away. The power in the movement was amazing. It was controlled, huge, and there was no anger, just complete confidence. Liam tripped and fell back onto the stones, losing his phone. The crowd went wild, with a mix of clapping, nervous laughter, and a few whoops from people who wanted to see some justice. Ethan tried to be the hero by lunging at Oliver with his arms outstretched, trying to grab the reins. But Oliver was quicker. He stepped aside, grabbed Ethan's wrist, and with a quick twist, put him on the ground, face down, with his arm behind his back. It wasn't rough, but it was clear that he was in charge. Jordan dropped his GoPro and tried to run. But the police officers who were moving through the edges of the crowd saw what was going on. One officer grabbed Jordan's arm, steady but calm, and stopped him in his tracks. For a second, the only sounds were Ethan's muffled complaints, Liam's heavy breathing, and Thunder's steady snorts as he circled back to Oliver's side, standing between the fallen hooligans and the tourists to protect them. Oliver looked out over the scene. The crowd was now fully on his side. The parents were holding their children, the old man who had saluted, and the street performer who had stopped playing and was watching with wide eyes. He didn't need to say anything. The message was clear. This was not a place for disorder or disrespect. Liam, who was dazed, slowly sat up and rubbed his shoulder. His face had lost its bravado and was now full of sullen, almost childlike confusion. He looked at Thunder, who had his head down, and his eyes were steady and unreadable. I just wanted to have some fun, Liam said, but his words got lost in the crowd's growing murmur. The same little boy who had spoken before pulled on his mother's sleeve. Mom, is the horse all right? The mother smiled, and her face looked relieved. He's not just okay, sweetheart. He's a hero. Ethan, still pinned down, began to complain. Come on, let us go. We didn't hurt anyone. But the police were already there, calm and firm, reading Ethan his rights as they started to put cuffs on both him and Jordan. When things calmed down, Oliver knelt down next to Thunder and checked to see if he was in any pain. He gave him a gentle pat on the neck and a reassuring scratch under the mane. Thunder's breathing was slow and steady. He had finished his work. Tourists moved in closer now, taking pictures not only of the show but also of the bond between the man and the horse. Someone in the crowd yelled, "That's the best thing I've seen in London all week." Some people clapped, while others just smiled in quiet admiration. But Oliver only cared about Thunder. He whispered, "Good boy," in a low voice. "You did everything right. You kept your cool." The energy on Horse Guards Parade changed for the first time. The threat was gone, and in its place was respect. For a moment, everyone seemed to understand how important tradition and discipline are. Thunder, the horse everyone thought was just for show, had become the day's true center. He had kept everyone else from crossing the line. The sun went down behind the rooftops, leaving long golden shadows on the stones. People started to leave, and stories were already going around on social media and being whispered to friends. And in the middle of it all, Thunder stood, calm and proud. Proof that history can sometimes come back to bite you. The chaos didn't go away all at once. After the fight, the world seemed to be in a strange silence for a moment, like the time between the thunder and the lightning. The crowd stood still, with their eyes wide and hearts racing, and 100 phones still pointed at the strange scene in the middle of Horse Guards Parade. The pigeons even seemed to stop moving, heads tilted, as if they were waiting to see how this story would end. Liam lay on the stone, propped up on one elbow. The wind and pride had knocked him out. His phone, which was still streaming live, was just out of reach and was taking an unflattering picture of his face as he tried to sit up. The comments were pouring in, going from encouraging him to roasting him with a brutal kind of internet justice. "Serves you right," "Mess with the Queen's Guard," "Get the horn," and "Thunder is the MVP." Ethan and Jordan were also down, Ethan muttering under his breath while the police officer kept a steady hand on his shoulder, and Jordan looking around for his lost GoPro, his eyes full of regret. The Metropolitan Police came in, and their presence was both quick and calm. One officer, a woman in her 30s with a calm, practiced face, knelt down next to Liam and asked if he was hurt. He mumbled, "No, I'm fine. Just my ego. Really." and didn't look her in the eye. The officer nodded, not impressed. "You'll have to stand, sir, and you'll have to answer some questions." Another officer helped Ethan up next to them, gently but firmly. "Hey, you guys know this is Crown property, right? There are rules against bothering the guard and their horses. Do you understand that these are crimes against public order and peace?" Ethan nodded, looking embarrassed now that the fight was over. "Okay. We're sorry, buddy. Didn't mean anything." Jordan, who was more shaken than he wanted to admit, just let himself be led away. The GoPro was now hanging uselessly from his hand. He kept looking at Thunder, as if he thought the big horse might rear up and chase him. Thunder, on the other hand, was completely calm and disciplined. Oliver came back to his side and checked him over carefully, like someone checking on a close friend after a close call. His breathing was steady, and his nostrils flared only a little. He stroked Thunder's neck and whispered kind words, feeling the slow beat of his heart under his palm. "You did a great job, boy. Perfect in every way. That's how a guardsman stays strong." The rest of the crowd clapped in waves. At first it was just a few claps, but it grew into something bigger, a group outpouring of relief and admiration. A little boy from Britain, grinning from ear to ear, pointed at Thunder and said, "That horse is cooler than Spider-Man." His mother laughed, which broke the tension, and people started taking pictures, not of the chaos, but of the calm that followed. The couple back together, the police doing their jobs, and the feeling that tradition had finally stood up to the craziness of the modern world. "Good job, officer," someone yelled, and other voices echoed it, bouncing off the stone. The street performer, who had seen everything happen, started playing a slow, triumphant version of "God Save the King." The tourists who had been scared before now felt safe enough to get close to the cordon and were once again curious. But there were still things to deal with. The police talked to witnesses and wrote down what they saw very carefully. They also asked Oliver questions, but they did so with a kind of quiet respect. This wasn't his first time, and he knew how to keep his answers clear, factual, and calm. "Thunder did what it was supposed to do, ma'am. He made sure he and the public were safe." He said in a steady voice, "No force was used beyond what was necessary." Liam and Ethan sat on a low wall with their hands cuffed and their heads down. The excitement of the afternoon was gone. Jordan, who wasn't handcuffed but was clearly shaken, watched as the police van took his friends away. The officers explained the tickets to the young men: public disorder, reckless behavior, and getting in the way of a service animal. They then gave each of them a formal penalty notice, which said that their fines were high enough to hurt. Even the most skeptical people could see that no one here wanted to fight. The lesson had been learned the hard way, in the old court of public opinion, where one act of disrespect could spread across the city, thanks to every smartphone and every whispered story. Thunder rumbled softly, bringing Oliver back to the present. The sergeant smiled, and for a moment, the world went away. He took off his helmet, ran a hand through his sweaty hair, and looked at his horse with something like awe. "You showed them, didn't you? Tradition is strong, and it's never just for show." A young woman came up and shyly held out her phone. "Excuse me, could I take a picture with Thunder? He's amazing." Oliver nodded, and his chest swelled with pride. "Sure. Please just stand next to him. Today he's getting the hero treatment." The woman stood next to Thunder and smiled a big, real smile. The camera clicked, capturing not just a memory, but also a piece of history. It showed that something old and good had survived despite all the noise and disrespect. People hung around everywhere. They told each other stories, compared videos, and were amazed at how well the guard and his horse behaved. A few people asked Oliver questions, like how long Thunder had been training, what it was like to ride in parades, and how he stayed calm under pressure. Oliver answered each one in turn, giving them just enough information to feel like they were part of something bigger. As the sun went down, the crowd started to thin out. Parents took their kids to dinner, and tourists went to see the next thing. The last sounds of chaos faded away as the police van drove away. Horse Guard's parade fell back into its normal, dignified rhythm. Oliver got back on his horse and patted Thunder's neck. He sat up straight and looked around the plaza, pleased that he had done right by his uniform, his partner, and his country. He just breathed for a long time, taking in the summer air, the fading noise, and the weight and pride of history. In the heart of London, Thunder stood by him, steady and unbreakable. The mood on the square changed as the sky above Horse Guard's parade went from pale gold to the softer colors of evening. The fight's chaos and adrenaline faded away, leaving behind a quiet room full of new respect. For a few quiet moments, people didn't just see a guard and a horse. They saw living symbols and history coming to life in front of them. A BBC camera crew, who had been told about the event, slipped through the crowd as it was breaking up. Their reporter, who was quick and polite, caught Oliver as he checked Thunder's bridle one last time. "Sergeant Kensington, can we get a few words for the news tonight?" Oliver paused and looked down at Thunder. He didn't like the spotlight. His whole life had been about doing the work, not talking about it. But the way people looked at him, with a mix of curiosity and admiration, made him stop. It might be time to say something that would stick. He straightened his jacket and spoke clearly and calmly. Thunder is more than just a horse. He has been taught how to stay calm under pressure so that he and everyone else are safe. He did exactly what he was told to do today. That's what discipline means, knowing your purpose even when the world is loud. The reporter nodded, and her eyes were warm. There's a lot of talk about the differences between tradition and modern life, like social media, viral videos, and people not following these old rules. What would you say to people who think this is all just a show? Oliver thought about it and looked at Thunder again. Thunder stood still like a black statue, his ears flicking at the sounds around him. Tradition isn't just for show. It's about keeping the things that work, like the lessons and the values. Without respect, you can't have pride or unity. That's not out of date. That's how a society stays together. Liam stood with his friends nearby, while police officers kept an eye on them as their tickets were being processed. The confidence was gone, and in its place was a quiet discomfort. Liam crossed his arms and bit his lip while watching the interview. His phone had died hours ago, but the truth of what happened would last longer than any viral video. Ethan, who was hurt and deflated, leaned against the police van and said, "I didn't think it would go that far." Jordan watched the shaky footage on his GoPro, rewinding it, pausing it, and staring at how powerful and controlled the animal was in every move. One of the officers leaned in and spoke to them in a stern but not rude way. "You were lucky. Most days it's just warnings and fines. Some days things get worse. You should think about what respect means, especially in this case. For them, this isn't just a job." Liam nodded but didn't quite look her in the eye. "Yeah, I understand now. I wasn't trying to be bad. I just thought it would be funny, you know? But that horse? He's something else." The officer raised an eyebrow. Maybe you'll remember that the next time you want to cause trouble at a parade. A small group of tourists came up to Oliver in the middle of the square with more questions. How do you teach a horse to be so brave? A French teenager with a lilting accent asked. Oliver smiled and looked at Thunder. It's not only the training. Thunder and other horses have a kind of wisdom. They know when to be still and when to move. Our trust in each other is what matters most. He looks out for me, and I look out for him. Thunder softly nickered, as if it understood every word. The tourists laughed, their voices softening with awe. A local newspaper reporter was taking notes and listening to the noise of people talking a little way away. He caught up with Liam and asked, "Do you have any regrets about today, buddy?" Liam shrugged and turned red. Maybe I thought it was all for show, right? The guard is only for tourists. But that horse, Thunder, is real. You can't fake that. I learned something today, and I bet we all did. The journalist nodded and wrote down the quote. Then he turned to the old veteran who had been watching the whole thing from his bench. The man straightened his military medals and said it all in a clear voice. That's why we have customs. It's not the uniform, the horse, or the ceremony that matters. It's about having respect for history, discipline, and each other. Later, the BBC reporter filmed her last scene, with the square behind her in soft evening shadow. At first it was a fight, but it turned into a lesson for everyone who saw it about discipline, tradition, and the bond between man and horse. It seems that some things are worth keeping in a city that is moving so quickly. Oliver took Thunder for a slow walk around the edge of the square as the last few tourists left and the media packed up. The sound of Thunder's hooves hitting the old stone echoed as they moved together perfectly. For a few minutes, there were no people or cameras, just the two of them breathing in the cool night air. Oliver patted Thunder's neck and said, "You were great today. No medals for horses, but you deserve one in my book." Thunder stretched out his head and touched Oliver's sleeve with his nose. That one simple gesture made everything clear. Have faith, responsibility, being friends. And somewhere out there, 1,000,000 people would watch videos of Thunder again and again. Some would laugh, some would learn, and some would just be amazed at what one horse and one man could do. But for those who had been there in person, the lesson was more meaningful and stayed with them longer. People are too quick to make fun of things they don't understand. Sometimes a horse can show everyone what real strength looks like. As the last rays of sunlight hit the rooftops along Whitehall, the noise from Horse Guards parade reached the outside world. Word spread quickly, like the wind in London. At first, it was just whispers in the crowd. Then, 1,000 phones got push notifications and news alerts at once. What had started as a fight between 3 drunk football fans and a guard horse that wouldn't move was already getting out of hand. Video clips went viral on TikTok, Instagram, and even local news feeds. A shaky video taken by a Dutch tourist showed the moment Thunder moved his weight and made Liam fall. Another clip showed Oliver getting off his horse, standing tall and calm, and holding Ethan back as the crowd cheered. The hashtags came in quickly. #Thunder the hero, #respect the guard, and #London strong. By the time dinner came, Thunder was trending. But the energy at the parade ground had changed. Even though the online world was going crazy, a new group of football fans had started to come into the area. Their voices could be heard coming from a nearby pub down the narrow streets. There was an edge in the air. Some of it was curiosity, some was excitement, and some was leftover bravado from the match earlier that day. Some of the rowdier new people started old chants, and their voices got louder as they tried to bring back the craziness. But where there may have been chaos before, there was now an undeniable sense of order. Oliver sat on Thunder's back and watched, looking proud and like a calm leader. It was as if the lesson had already set in. Instead of letting things get out of hand, Oliver gently pushed Thunder forward. The big horse walked slowly and steadily, almost like it was a ceremony. He didn't attack or get scared. He just walked, his hooves echoing on the stone, and the crowd moved back without him saying a word. Every step was like a ripple in the water, a quiet wave of respect and discipline that spread from the horse to the people. The new fans stopped chanting when they saw the horse coming. Their eyes met Thunder's, a living wall of black muscle and quiet intelligence. Without even thinking about it, they stepped aside, making room where there had been only noise before. There was no violence and no need for harsh words. Thunder's power was enough. One of the young men, who was a little less drunk than the others, turned to his friends and said, "Just leave it, okay? That's the Queen's horse. Don't mess." His words got through, and the group, torn between bravado and peer pressure, fell silent, and then moved toward the lights of Trafalgar Square. A few older people in London, who were watching from a distance, looked at each other knowingly. "Look at that? Proper order, that is," one said quietly, his accent full of pride. "Not just their uniforms, but also how they act. That's what holds this city together." The mood got better all around. Tourists who had been nervous just a few minutes before were now taking pictures of Thunder and Oliver, talking to strangers, and being amazed at how well the afternoon's near chaos had been handled. A grandmother from Manchester smiled at Oliver as he walked by, holding her granddaughter's hand. "Young man, you and your horse are a credit to this country," she said in a warm voice. Even though the crowd started to thin, what had happened still had power. People stayed to talk about what they had seen, a time when tradition not only held strong, but also actively kept the peace and brought it back. In the digital world, Thunder became a symbol that went beyond the parade ground. A BBC commentator wrote, "In a time when respect is too often forgotten, one black horse in central London reminded us all what discipline looks like." Young and old fans alike argued on social media about what it meant. Was it about national pride, the need for limits, or maybe just a good old-fashioned lesson in how to behave? The mayor's office even retweeted a video that said, "Tradition is not weakness. It is what keeps us grounded. Thanks to #Thunder the Hero and our household cavalry for making London proud." As the light faded, Oliver was bombarded with questions from all sides. "Are you ever afraid up there?" "Why?" asked a teenage boy with wide eyes. Oliver smiled and shook his head. "It's not about not being afraid. It's about having faith in Thunder and the people around you." A local BBC radio reporter, who wanted to get a live quote, pushed a microphone toward Oliver. "Do you have anything to say to the people at home?" Oliver looked at Thunder, then back at the camera. "Sometimes the world moves too quickly. We all want to be noticed, to go viral and to be different. But respect and self-control are the things that last and are really important. Thunder teaches me that every day. He might have taught a few more people today, too." The reporter smiled. "Do you think Thunder knows he's famous?" Oliver laughed. "Of course he knows when people are watching, but he's happy with an extra treat and a scratch behind the ear." At that moment, a man with white hair and a row of medals on his jacket stepped forward. He shook Oliver's hand and said, "In my day, we didn't have the internet to tell our stories. But this one they'll remember. The horse is more than just a part of the show. He is a part of history that is still alive and well in London." Some people left to go home, while others went on to their next adventure. But they left different, more thoughtful, quieter, and a little more aware of what they had seen. The stories would spread, changing shape in 1,000 retellings, but the truth at the heart of it all would stay the same. Discipline was not a sign of weakness, and sometimes the strongest force was a quiet one. Oliver and Thunder stood next to each other as the last rays of sunlight painted the square in amber. They felt closer than ever, like they had made a silent promise to face whatever came their way together. And somewhere on the internet, Thunder's story got bigger with every click and share. This showed that sometimes all it took was one horse to remind a city how to stand tall. Horseguard's parade had changed by the time the sky turned dark and the last of the sunlight disappeared behind the rooftops. It wasn't just the usual clearing out of tourists or the slow fading of day into night. There was something deeper, a feeling of respect and understanding that settled over the square like a warm blanket. After the show in the afternoon, things got really quiet. People still came, either out of curiosity or habit, but the crowd was quieter now. Instead of the loud shouting that had been going on for hours, there was a soft murmur. As stories do in London, the word got around on a wave of whispers, news flashes, and TikTok shares. Somehow people knew, without being told, that this was a place that needed care. Thunder stood by the stone steps, his black coat catching the gold of the street lamps. He looked just like the icon he had become. Oliver, who was back on the horse, patted its neck and took a deep breath, letting go of the last of the stress. Premises gaining warmly donations. There it was. The crowd was still there, but the mood had changed. No one asked for a close-up selfie. They all stood back, phones in hand, but kept a respectful distance. Some people took pictures from a distance, putting Thunder and Oliver in front of old buildings, while others just watched and were happy to see something real. A little girl in a yellow dress pulled on her father's sleeve. "Can I see the horse, Dad?" "Why?" she asked in a low voice. Her father got down on one knee and pointed. "Sweetheart, you can look, but we have to be nice. That horse is special. He's a hero." The girl waved from a distance and nodded, her eyes wide. Thunder's ear twitched in her direction. As if he knew what she was doing, Oliver smiled to himself. The nods, waves, and respectful silence meant more to me than any headline. People willingly moved out of the way as Oliver led Thunder along the edge of the parade ground, their eyes lingering in appreciation. A group of teens stopped talking, took off their hats, and watched in silence. The boys who had been rowdy earlier, who had just gotten out of jail and were much calmer, came back with a different energy. They stood together and talked quietly to each other instead of yelling. As Liam walked by, he caught Oliver's eye. He felt both embarrassed and thankful. He raised his hand slowly. "Sorry about before, buddy. At first I didn't understand, but now we do." His voice was humble, and the bravado was gone. Oliver nodded and smiled a little. "It takes guts to say that. Thank you." As night fell, the last few camera crews packed up and left. Their stories were already on the evening news. A BBC reporter filmed a last part on a bench nearby. Today, Horseguard's parade saw more than just a disturbance. It saw a lesson in discipline, tradition, and the quiet strength of respect. Maybe the past still has something to teach us, even in a city that moves so quickly. A woman came up to them with a small bag of carrots. "Is that okay for Thunder?" she asked shyly. Oliver laughed. He deserves a treat today. He bent down, took a carrot, and gave it to Thunder, who took it gently from his hand and chewed it happily. A few people clapped softly, and the crowd loved it. The soft routine started up again. The last tours were over, and the busker played a slow, sweet song. The historic stones in the square glowed in the soft city lights. But the day's mood stayed with me. People looked at each other, smiled, and said quiet words of thanks. There was a new sense of respect in the old city. Later that night, at the barracks, after Thunder was groomed and settled, Oliver sat alone for a moment with his boots off and his back against the cool wall. He thought about the fight, the fear, and how Thunder had stayed calm while everything else went crazy. He thought about the crowd's cheers, the kids who had asked about the horse, and even the hooligans who had been humbled. He smiled, even though he was tired and proud. It wasn't about winning medals or getting headlines. There was a small change he could feel, and waves of new understanding had spread across the city. He sent a message to his sister, who had seen the video online. "Long day, but Thunder is a star. You would have loved it." She answered right away. "You both make us proud. London needs more days like this." He looked at a picture that someone had given him. It was a printout from a phone that was a little blurry. Thunder was in the middle of the step, and the crowd moved aside for him. Oliver was tall in the saddle. The picture had power and peace. The lights of the city flickered outside. A group of young tourists nearby were watching videos from the day on their phones and telling friends who hadn't seen them live. The story got bigger as it was told, but Thunder was always at the center. He was more than just a ceremonial horse. He was a real protector. The city was quiet around Oliver as he fell asleep. He knew there would be more days, more people, and more problems. Horse Guard's parade had changed a little bit tonight, but the bond between a man, his horse, and his city had never been stronger. London moved on the night after everything changed on Horse Guard's parade, just like it always does. Taxis honked, the river sparkled under bridges, and office towers glowed in the distance. But for those who had seen what happened that day, something small but important had changed. Oliver got up early at the barracks, long before sunrise, because his old discipline wouldn't let him sleep in. When he got to his stable, Thunder greeted him with perked ears, as if he was ready to start a new day. Oliver took his time brushing Thunder's strong neck and listening to the soft thump of his hooves on the straw. He whispered soft words, both nonsense and praise, and felt the trust between them like a warm stream. The story spread even more as the city woke up. News anchors played the video again, Thunder pushing back the unruly, Oliver stepping in with quiet authority, and the crowd cheering and clapping. People who only saw the event on their phones felt its effects. People talked about it on the tube, in the kitchens of their offices, and over breakfast at the cafe on the corner. It wasn't just the drama or the danger that stood out to everyone. It was the way respect had been restored, not through yelling or force, but through a steady presence and old-school discipline. Thunder's calmness, Oliver's self-control, and the crowd's eventual acknowledgement. For one rare afternoon, London remembered who it was. Back at Horse Guard's parade, things felt different, like they were honoring something. People came to see Oliver and Thunder take their place for the day's watch, but this time they stayed back and formed a loose semicircle instead of crowding in. Some of them whispered to their kids about what happened yesterday, while others just stood there and took it all in. A dad pointed to Thunder while holding his son on his shoulders. "That's the horse that was on the news. Look how calm he is. That's real strength." The boy's eyes were wide with wonder and questions. A group of teens filmed a short video near the steps. Instead of making fun of each other or playing pranks, they talked to each other with respect. This is where Thunder stood his ground. Legend, dude. Proper legend. They ended their video with a salute. Oliver saw everything. The small changes and the unspoken thanks. He couldn't help but smile and feel a sense of pride that was deeper than any medal or award. It was a pride that came from history, duty, and seeing that the old ways could still touch people's hearts in a world that moves quickly. People came and went all day. Some people put flowers on the steps. As Oliver and Thunder passed by, a few veterans with medals on their chests saluted them. The kids at school drew pictures and left them on the railings. There was a stick figure Oliver, a majestic Thunder, and hearts and stars all around them. Even the troublemakers, who had been changed by what happened, sent a message on social media. Respect to Thunder and the Guard. We learned the hard way. Let's take care of what makes London special. It spread quickly, even surprising the people who started it, and it became an unofficial motto for the week. A BBC reporter came back for one last story as the afternoon went on. The camera moved around the square, showing the flowers, the drawings, and the people who were quietly paying attention. She spoke with a soft but strong voice. In the middle of modern London, where there was noise and new things, tradition found its voice. Not in words, but in action. Thunder and his rider reminded us all, strength isn't always loud, and respect never goes out of style. The last picture in her report was of Thunder eating fresh grass, Oliver scratching his ears, and people laughing. For a moment, the city's heart beat in time with something old and good. Oliver got ready to end his shift as the sun began to set. He stayed for a while, letting Thunder graze by the railings. He smiled softly as he watched the kids say goodbye. He knew the city would get busy again and new dramas would happen. But for now, in this golden hour, there was peace. He looked at the crowd and raised his voice just enough for them to hear. Thanks for coming. Tell someone else if you learned something today. Respect isn't just for ceremonies. It's for everyone, every day. Give it to someone else. There was a wave of applause that was real and warm. As the last light faded, Oliver climbed onto Thunder's back and led him through the gates. The sound of hooves was a quiet song for the city. People stayed for a while, holding on to the feeling a little longer and promising to remember. Oliver took off Thunder's tack and gave him one last treat when they got back to the barracks. The horse nudged his shoulder, and their bond was renewed without words. Before going to bed, Oliver looked at the picture from the day before one last time. It showed Thunder standing tall, a line that no one could cross. He knew that stories would come and go, but this lesson would stay with him. Wells' strength was steady, quiet when it needed to be, and didn't back down when someone disrespected it. Oliver whispered, "We did good, old friend," as the lights of London twinkled through the windows. Thunder nickered softly in reply, as if to say, "We did." The story of Thunder and the Guard became part of London's living memory. It was not just a story of one day's drama, but also a story about the strength that comes from honor, calm, and the courage to stand firm when it matters most. Don't forget to share this story if it changed how you think about tradition. Respect is for everyone. Pass it on and let's keep London strong. To find out more about the Household Cavalry, like and subscribe to join us next time. See you soon.